Right on. Hey, welcome everybody. I'm John Stid. I'm the CMO at DealMaker. We're co-hosting this Deal Saloon with the team here at EnergyX. Thanks so much for joining. This is the first of 3 panels. This is the cleantech panel. It's going to be led by Jennifer here, senior contributor at Forbes, focusing on science, technology, and sustainability. So nobody better to kick us off. Cheers.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you guys for coming. I'm so excited. Clean energy for the win, right? Yeah, woo, I love it. Little woo in the air. So we have 3 clean tech, dare I say titans? Can I say that? Titans? And I'm really excited because you guys have done so much to move this industry forward. So we are going to kick this off with them telling your origin story, like Wolverine, your origin story. And just a little bit so we can set this up and move down the line and we can take this story to the people so we can see how you're changing our world.
First, thank you. For those that don't know me, I'm Teague Egan, and I'm the founder and CEO of EnergyX. EnergyX is a lithium technology and production company. We're developing 2 projects that will hopefully produce enough lithium to power over 1 million electric vehicles a year. I started the company back in 2018.
Backstory, though, about that company. Who started it?
I don't think your mic's working now, but I do have a backstory. The way that I came up with the idea, I was taking a trip down to South America, and my travels took me through Bolivia, of all places, kind of off the beaten trail. And Bolivia is actually home to the world's largest lithium reserve. And I was touring this salt flat, and I found out that the country of Bolivia wasn't producing any lithium from the world's largest lithium reserve. And I said, that's a problem that I have to solve. So I started EnergyX, and we developed some technology to more efficiently and cost-effectively extract this lithium. We ended up putting a pilot plant down in Bolivia. The whole lithium resource is controlled by the government, and there were some geopolitical issues in working with Bolivia, so
we're going to get to geopolitical later.
Perfect. So that's my backstory. I'll pass it to Thomas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So, Thomas Healy, founder and CEO of Hyliion. To answer your question, I've kind of always known I've wanted to be an entrepreneur back to when I was a little kid. Kind of different than most kids. When my parents would pick my sister and I up from school, as opposed to going home, we would actually go back to their office building. They were both founders and CEOs as well. We'd go to their office building. My sister and I had a converted office that was converted into a playpen. And we'd do our homework there. We'd play games and stuff. And then we'd go to dinner, and then we'd go home. So ever since that point, I've known I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. Fast forward to going to college, started a couple of different companies in undergrad. And then when I went into grad school, I had this idea of moving into the green tech space. And so Hyliion is a company focused on making modular power plant technology. So it's basically this concept of make your own power. So just like facilities have air conditioning units that sit outside, our vision is they're also going to have a box that sits outside that makes the electricity they need, but makes it for cheaper and cleaner than our grid electricity.
I love that. Everybody's always connected to their past. Like, you can't get away from it in a way. Like, you went on this journey and you discovered this and you've been a kid entrepreneur. Sean, what about you?
Hey everyone. So I'm Sean, founder of the Austin Climate Hub, which is on a mission to accelerate clean energy innovation in Austin and support the broader energy ecosystem here in Texas. Also director of EarthX Capital. For anyone who notices a bit of an accent, I'm from South Africa originally. My family immigrated to the States. I went to high school in Iowa in '96, and I somehow got into Stanford. I got into campus on 2001, and you're there on this country club of a campus. It's sunny, amazing people, world opening up before you, so many opportunities. And I'm thinking, just a few years ago, I was in South Africa, and for anyone that's been there, you know that you grow up in the context of massive economic disparity. You see quite literally people living in shanty towns, and I just couldn't square that. Like, how am I in the 0 point, as many zeros as you can think of, percent that has this lottery ticket, and millions of people back in South Africa and billions around the world don't have access to water or energy or even dignity, and that for me, created really almost a crushing existential sense of responsibility around like what I would do with that. At the same time, I ended up taking a class at Stanford called Plant Genetic Engineering by the super famous biologist, which really opened up my eyes to the world of green revolution, the role of technology, climate change for the first time, and from there it was like, okay, like there is a role of technology in making human existence on this planet more sustainable, and that's what I'm going to go and do, and we'll probably talk more about that in a little bit, but that for me was the genesis.
Yeah, thank you guys. I love the passion. Like it all comes from passion from all three of you. Now we're going to talk about the hard question, and the hard question is vision and reality. Because you guys all have a vision, and now you're on that path to make it a reality. So, like, were there any assumptions in the beginning when you started this journey that have been shattered? Or have there been any things that surprised you to get you on the path where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, there's always assumptions that are shattered. That's the life of an entrepreneur. You know, when you're starting a business or starting a company and trying to grow it, literally almost nothing turns out the way that you think it will. You know, when I was starting in the early days of EnergyX, I had a lot of momentum and started to build this lithium extraction technology, and I thought that it would be pretty easy to license this technology to existing lithium resource owners because it is so much better than what currently exists out there. For those that are unfamiliar, the way that lithium is produced today from brine, which is salty water, is they put it into these huge evaporation ponds that are 100 football fields for one pond, and then they have 100 ponds. And it takes 18 months to go through this pond sequence. It's really inefficient. They only recover about 30 to 40% of the lithium. And the technology that we developed takes up 1/100th the footprint. It recovers over 90%, so a 300% increase, and it costs a lot less. So I thought it would be easy to license to the big existing lithium producers. That couldn't be further than the truth. What I didn't think about was that they had already invested billions of dollars into that really inefficient infrastructure, and these are super long sales cycles, and that's ultimately why we decided to acquire our own resources and vertically integrate so that we could control our own destiny. That was a big early assumption that was proven wrong.
That's a good one because I think, Thomas, you have a similar story.
Yeah, personally, I've never met a founder that says, oh, this is easy and it just went exactly how I planned. Like, startups are roller coasters. That's the nature of it. Our roller coaster has been, when I founded this company back in 2015, we were actually making powertrains for electric semi-trucks. So nothing to do with power generation. We were making EV vehicles. And we went public on that premise. We took the company public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2020, raised over $700 million of capital. We raised to a valuation of $10 billion. So think about that, like a dorm room startup company raising to a $10 billion valuation. And then everything changed. And then everything changed. The EV space became this journey where it was like not attractive to be in anymore. Adoption was much slower. Like people thought that over half the semi-trucks by this time would be electric vehicles. The reality is it's like 1%, right? So the adoption didn't happen. So then we said, all right, well, let's get out of this space. We've got this awesome technology in power gen. Let's move over to that. So think about that. Like a company that once had momentum of being valued at $10 billion, you realize, actually, this isn't a good journey to be on. We need to go do something else.
That's scary to make that big of a pivot.
Most definitely.
Yeah, he's like, yep, that's scary. Sean, for you, I mean, you've moved a lot of people through this space and supported this industry. So what assumptions for you were shattered in your journey?
Yeah, thanks so much. So, in terms of the entrepreneurial journey, I started a search fund in 2018, specifically to go out and find and acquire a business exactly within these themes. That ended up leading me to take over the founder role at a company called Biologics, which I built successfully over 3 years, and I can share many, many war stories on what it's like to have a sort of a hardware capital intensive, also technologically intensive company, day-to-day knife fight, and then coming back from that now in Austin, I'm building the Austin Climate Hub, which is basically like simultaneously trying to build a company, an early stage fund, and a nonprofit, and all of those things have their own challenges and assumptions. But the way I want to actually respond to this question is, continuing that point in that story, I started in the space being like, science is the answer. I literally was going to go be a scientist and engineer. I got into Princeton for my PhD. I was like, okay, but then I'm like, no, science by itself isn't going to cut this. You need the business and the economics to scale. So at a startup back in Green Tech 1.0, I helped to build McKinsey's sustainability practice. And then you're like, okay, but like one business and one product is only going to move the needle so much. Like, I mean, I need a different policy regime, and that ended up leading me to go all the way through to working in economic development. There was this moment I remember where I just kind of like broke. I was like, we're not going to get there. And I was actually like I was upriver in Borneo seeing like the worst ecological genocide like I think I've ever seen. And it wasn't logging, it wasn't palm oil, it was Dayak Indians living in villages, slash and burn agriculture, illegal mining, and I was like, dude, okay, the fault is in our stars. We're like, our DNA is consume resources, multiply, repeat, and that idea of like, okay, look, we're not going to get there. That was a difficult thing to live with for a minute, and I think ultimately, for any of us that are operating in this space as founders or investors or otherwise, you have to find a way to be able to live between this cognitive dissonance of both being on this incredible growth curve that our industry is on while still being below the growth curve that we need to get at. And I think the way that you ultimately do that is, first of all, understanding that it's not going to be any one company, not going to be any one founder, not going to be any one investor. We all have to basically be doing this, and for your individual journey, finding the passion and the purpose in what you're doing, and whatever else is, whether it's the people or the competition, right? And I think if we can all do this, then together we got a shot.
You had the same, oh my God, they're not in Bolivia, they're not using their resources. And I think in all of the experiences that you guys have had and major pivots, do you think this is why your companies and the companies that you've worked with and what you've formed are on the right path forward?
Yeah, so I can kind of share the facts behind it. So there were 15, 20, roughly somewhere in that ballpark, EV companies that went public during our time as well. I would say more than half of them have actually gone into bankruptcy or are right at that cusp, right? I mean, you can go down the list. You got like companies like Nikola, Hyliion, Proterra, Lordstown, Rival, I think now has, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, you need to be, as the founder, as the CEO of a company, you need to be watching it, like, where are things going? And I think one of the things we want to talk about a little bit is like capital raising and what does that look like. And so if you are in an industry where there is momentum and you have a good idea for clean tech, there's a good opportunity to go get funding. If you're in an industry where it's lost momentum, what I've seen is a lot of the VCs, a lot of the investors are then saying, well, I don't want to be over there anymore. Even if you have a good idea, a good product that you're working on.
They're very fickle sometimes.
Yeah, they want to be with the momentum. They want a tailwind behind the company. They don't want to be something that is part of the past, right? Even though, like, electric vehicles, how is that part of the past, right? I would say it's not, but I guess it is to investors.
Moved on already.
Yeah, exactly. So power gen, good thing is AI uses a crap ton of power and data centers and everything, so that's why we're now in that space.
I want to just give him some props because I did a little Google trail. And if you Google power generators, the history of generators, it lists like the type of generators we've had. And at the bottom, at the end of that list, it said, and Carno. So congratulations, you made the list.
We're finally there.
You're there. Okay. And let's go to funding because I know it's something you all want to talk about. And Sean posted a very intriguing topic on his LinkedIn page the other day about the intermingling of clean tech, defense tech, energy policy, sustainability. How is that going to affect clean tech and all the funding, the future of funding? Is it going to, pull back, or is it going to move forward? I think this is something everybody wants to hear from them on, yeah?
Well, I'll talk about future of clean tech in a second, which I'm insanely bullish on. But to answer this question right now, yeah, I mean, look, I think fundraising sucks in general, regardless of where you're at. But it can be particularly hard in climate and clean tech, where you have business models which often have more of a capital-intensive component. There might be a long applied science technology timeline, or other factors. And so I think founders in climate and clean tech need to be more aware of and thinking about a sort of a portfolio of options between grant funding, venture debt, other sources of capital. And absolutely, government and defense is something that should be on your radar. I don't think people actually appreciate the fact that basically all of defense tech, with the possible exception, with the exception of munitions, is basically clean tech. And I could go on and on and on, but from microgrids for resilience to electric tactical vehicles and drones and so forth. And I think one thing we're going to see in this current environment is folks being a lot more thoughtful about, and by the way, not just as a source of capital, like also as a really important and strategic go-to-market, right? There are sort of the U.S. government is the biggest customer in the world. You should probably be thinking about selling to it, and and yes, finally, I would just say that grant funding and defense is something where it is honestly, clean tech founders are doing a disservice to themselves to not actually, I think, exploring that more and treating that space as a silo.
Yeah, there have actually been a few really important executive orders passed over the past few months related to critical minerals being produced domestically in the United States. And the U.S. government is thinking about stockpiling some of these critical minerals like lithium, because right now China produces they either produce or refine somewhere in the 70 to 85% total of the global critical minerals.
There was a new number. I think it was closer, getting on up to 87. You're right, it's 85 and going right up.
So we're thinking about and looking at selling to the U.S. government, like a great customer, of course. But in terms of the question you asked earlier too, do we think that we're on the right path? I mean, you're not a very smart entrepreneur if you don't think you're on the right path. It's your job to be able to look into the future almost, kind of like Thomas did, and say to himself, hey, I might not be on that. I need to transition, like we did with our business model. We didn't completely change businesses, which is, I mean, dude, I don't know how you did it. That is a huge undertaking, and takes some balls, I would say. But yeah,
some stressful times, to say the least.
Some stressful times, to say the least. But yeah, like for us, we have a 10-year master plan that we created in 2019. So that's super high-level stuff. We have a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, and then a plan for the next month and week, of course. But you always want to be looking ahead to try to make sure, or de-risk your path as much as you can. Like that's, right now we're in a lithium winter, I would say. The price has nosedived to the lowest in a really long time. And, similar to what Thomas was talking about, a lot of companies kind of downstream from us, be it in the battery or EV space, have gone bankrupt. Maybe some time ago, 3-5 years ago, there was a lot of hype around the space and people making investments that were based on that hype. Now it comes down to having a real business. I would actually argue that AI is the hype now. There's a lot of inflated valuations. We're going to probably see a lot of people lose money on a lot of that. But coming back to EVs are here to stay, undoubtedly. And while there are ebbs and flows, ups and downs in any market, as long as that is slightly up and to the right, you're going to see increased traction, increased growth, and there needs to be a supply chain for that. And as long as we have a real business where we're producing a product and generating revenue at good margins, that's what our business should be valued on. And that's what I hope investors would value it on, as opposed to some hype.
Yeah. Go ahead, Thomas, because
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that.
I just want to add, so I think you touched on something really important that's been a big shift is, I think in a lot of ways, Silicon Valley used to kind of stay away from the defense tech type companies. Now, like there's a company here in town, Saronic, who I just saw they just got a $4 billion valuation for making small autonomous ships for the military. So that we're seeing a lot of momentum shift over there. Talking about the government being a good customer, we're working directly with the Navy. We have Navy contracts where our power plant is actually selected for future autonomous vessels. And so it's like this, hey, give them the flexibility of use various fuels. It's really quiet. It's got great efficiency, low emissions, all those things. So now we're seeing this. The government's looking for some of this new tech versus in the past it was pretty tough to get funding unless you're like a Raytheon to go develop new government defense tech.
So this comes back to your comment. I know you wanted to close with it, but you opened it right up. This golden moment then in climate tech.
Yeah, I can barely contain myself.
I knew we needed to talk about it.
So let's just kind of look at this issue. I think people don't. We are truly in the internet moment for clean tech, and I think the next couple years are going to just make clear just how utterly dominant this energy and this technology actually is, and dispel the lost, hints and vestiges of any thought that this is something that is somehow supported by subsidies or that it's a niche sort of thing. I'll just say a couple things here. So number one, like wind and solar, like the cheapest forms of energy. Like, I'm sorry, you can't compete with zero marginal cost. Battery technology has gone down 10x in the last 10 years. We're at $50 like a kilowatt hour last year. It's going to continue to go down. Like anyone who tells me that basically having charging your battery on our grid with zero marginal cost doesn't completely transform the grid, and that like gas peaker plants can like somehow compete, like you're out of your mind. We've got the intersection of that with digital and data and a whole number of other factors. And just to kind of like really put a fine point on this, like Texas is at the exact charge of this. Republican Texas, purely price, free market based. Let's just take a look at a couple numbers here, right? So the Texas grid is the largest in the U.S. by a factor of 2.5x. We've got a peak load of like 85 gigawatts. Normally I'd ask you guys to guess, but like we are consistently hitting 80% renewables across the entire probably like right now actually it's not that windy of a day, but we're probably hitting about 80% renewables in the entire state of Texas right now. That's 20% nuclear, 40% solar, and about 20% wind. Average over the entire year, like nighttime, daytime, summer, winter, like we're already at 30%. We're number one in solar. We're number one in wind. We're number one in battery, or at least we're about to be, based purely on a market system that is designed only to give price signals, right? Let's also think about other things. We're about to double our grid. We've got about another 50 gigawatts of load that we're going to put in the next 5 years, all right? If you look at our interconnection queue, you're going to see 200,000 megawatts of renewables and maybe 10 to 15,000 megawatts of non-renewable. That is 95% of what is about to get built is renewables because it is cheaper, it is substantially faster, you can put it anywhere. The state of Texas just created a $5 billion basically like cheap loan fund to basically support natural gas. And I'm going to tell you that we're probably going to build like single-digit gas plants between now and 2030 because you cannot get a turbine to save your life. NRG, biggest player here in natural gas, they had to sign a deal with GE Vernova and Kiewit just to be able to vertically integrate to get their own gas turbines. We are literally talking about we need renewables to bridge to gas. All right, and again, this is Texas. The issues that we are facing here are at the forefront, and I think this is hopefully I'm hopefully trying to like tell you like no, like renewable energy is basically just like about to go and like beat up on the kids with the fucking glasses. All right, and I think the thing that
soundbite right there.
And I think like if there's one sort of like broader message is it's not just that Texas is the future of clean tech, it's that clean tech is the future. $2 trillion in basically funding and capital last year. I can promise you for a bunch, I don't have time to get into it right now, but like that number is going to be at least $6 trillion. We are seeing, like, this is truly the internet moment. Now the supply chains, the cost structures, everything is mature, and now it is all about basically innovating on financial model. There's so much opportunity, and I think the issue is that we are going through the most like tectonic shift of the largest industry that like human species has ever created. Decentralization, digitization, peer-to-peer, and people don't see it because when you come home, you turn your light switch on, it turns on, and you don't necessarily understand just how fundamentally massive the change that is going on. And I would finally just close to say, like, in this environment, you can, like, there are so many exciting business models, because if you're just riding a wave like this, you can innovate on business model, financial model, right? Like, and I think I hope everyone is excited about clean tech and is excited about clean tech in Texas as I am.
Guys, we are lucky to have Sean. He could be in Hollywood preparing for the Mr. and Mrs. Smith sequel, but he's here in Austin pushing clean tech forward.
I like it. I agree. Beautiful. Because if we don't have passion for what we're going to change in the world, we'll never get anywhere. Do you guys have anything to add on to that?
So hopefully everyone's convinced the grid is changing. that is locked in. Yeah, and I just wanted to like follow up with some really key examples. Like we work with a data center provider, one of the largest, and they have said right now they consume 6 gigawatts of electricity. By 2030, just 5 years from now, they want to be at 40 gigawatts of electricity. That's equivalent to take all of the energy that London uses, times it by 10, and that's how much one company is going to add onto the grid with their data centers. So this is, like, the grid is going to change. It's going to require a ton of different solutions. Echoing on all that, it's moving to a distributed model. It's no longer just this one massive power plant that's going to feed out to everything. You're going to have a bunch of different small installments all around that are all feeding in, supplying the locations they're next to with power. So it's an area that's evolving, it's changing fast, and it's a super exciting space to be in.
Doubling back around, because you had said you hope what you're building is not based on hype, but after what you had said, it's very clear that it shouldn't be. So my question is, do you think investors know this? Yeah, anybody, grab it.
No, it's completely night and day when you're talking to folks that are in the space, and we're just like literally like losing our minds. Like, because like for instance, me, right? You heard my story. I've been doing this for 25 years, and so for so long, it's like, no, you really are fighting essentially the direct and indirect subsidies of the ability to sort of pollute the environment for free and a number of other factors. And now I think it's, for me, those structural issues that I just talked about, the size of the supply chain, the exponential drivers of demand growth, the economic superiority, the use case superiority, all of those things have kind of hit a confluence in the last 5 years. This really is a new paradigm. Like the types of just like, you know, thinking fast, thinking slow, Kahneman, like cognitive failures that you see when you talk to folks that are like not in it, it's really comical. So no, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is like the $6 trillion internet moment for energy, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. You talk to really, really smart investors that have been really, really successful. But again, it goes back to that thing that when I turn on the light, nothing changes. So I don't understand how much is changing back there. That you just see these rationalizations. Oh, it must be subsidies. Or oh, there's not going to be enough lithium. Or like all these things. You're just like, dude. Like I'm like, this is what it must have been like. Someone like shouting about Bitcoin in 2007. You know, whenever it was.
Yeah, I think that there's, investing is a lot about momentum. The Bitcoin example is a good one, right? Like when the price is low and there's low adoption, there's less people that are willing to take that risk to invest. As you get more momentum and a lot more people are investing and piling in, then it's easy to get investment. For the lithium industry, when the prices are low, there's less people that want to invest. But in reality, that's actually the best time to invest, unless you don't think it's going to go back up, right? But like I said, there's ebbs and flows, highs and lows, and everything. Lithium is a critical component to not only the EV revolution, but also a lot of these data centers. And like I just was at a summit talking about data and powering data centers and AI, and there's going to be a huge mix to power this, much of which is renewable, right? Solar, wind, but also nuclear and products like Michael is building, or sorry, that Thomas is building. And there needs to be batteries too, because that balances the grid unless you have this self-sustained power generation. So, I think that we've been super fortunate raising capital. We've used companies like DealMaker, and that is democratizing, decentralizing, and digitizing capital raise, where you don't have to go to a big VC or you're taking the power out of the hands of few and putting it into the hands of many.
It's time for that model to change in a way anyway for this, because if they can't get their heads around it, then we can't move it forward. Did you have something you want to add? And then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, I was going to say this concept of like we haven't experienced the power issue yet. Like all the lights are on here, right? I mean, it works. That time is coming. And actually, one area that I'm even more concerned about is who's going to be willing to pay the most for electricity. My guess is it's not the person in their household that wants to turn their lights on. If you're competing to get the same power that a data center is trying to get, that they're making a lot of money off of being able to run that equipment, I think you as a consumer are going to see pretty substantial price increases unless we move into getting a lot more power generation.
That's a really good point. Do we have any questions? Because I think
I have the mic here that I can pass around if you have a question.
Cowboy hat has mic.
We have one. Oh, here we go.
Can't. Who?
Thank you. So, it was said that China refines something like 70% of the world's lithium.
Can you hold the mic a little bit closer?
All right. So China also produces, around 70% of the world's steel, 70% of the world's aluminum, 70% of the world's solar panels. All of these are critical inputs into all the renewable energy projects, right, that are being built today. But the last few months, it's been a bit of a shock. So if you're doing like an NPV calculation for a power project, you probably need to redo some of those calculations. So I was just wondering, given this movement, right, when pretty much every project that is being built or being planned has to recalculate their NPVs and their returns, how do you think that is going to shake out over the next year or so, or is it too early to tell?
So I think a couple things. One is, yes, 70%. We do have, so a couple things with supply chain, right? Like our supply chains for these technologies and resources are critical. I think the U.S. is belatedly realizing that both not only technology, but actually supply chains are of national security. That's why it started with the IRA, and now we'll continue here. We're seeing onshoring of battery manufacturing, onshoring of solar. We're going to see those industries develop domestically here. In the short term, do we get it from Korea and Japan? I think so. It's 70%, so there's still 30% out there. And I would just say that, I think we are missing the fact that, at least at a sort of a national discourse level, that this is national security, but in the broadest geopolitical sense of the word. If anyone has read Chip Wars, I think you understand this idea that technology drives military superiority, drives economic growth, drives geopolitical influence. China figured this out 20 years ago now, and we are very, very much at risk of losing this race. And I can tell you that owning domestic clean energy supply chains and staying in the race when it comes to clean tech is truly going to be a driver of who is the global superpower in the next 20 years. It's basically AI and clean energy. If you don't stay in the game on that, your country is done.
Yeah, I think that global supply chains are a little bit up in the air right now. A crazy stat for you. So, like you said, China produces 70% of the world's steel. They obviously have to get their iron ore. They produce some iron ore domestically. They get a lot of iron ore from Australia with BHP and Rio Tinto. They produce about 1.1 billion tons of steel. The next closest producer in the world is India at about 130 million. So they produce 1 billion more tons of steel than the next closest. I think that we have right here in Austin one of the most impressive manufacturing facilities in the world in the Tesla Gigafactory. I was over at the Boeing facility a few weeks ago. The US still has really impressive manufacturing, but not for some of the supply chain like steel, like aluminum, like the critical materials or minerals that China has. Korea, we're trying to keep some of our allies close, like Australia, like Korea, but we're almost seeing an unprecedented time with some of these trade wars that are just starting to pop up with tariffs that the new administration is putting in place. And that creates an uncertain future. If there's retaliation from those other countries throwing tariffs back on us, and then the tariffs just keep going up, and it just becomes, a trade war that could escalate into more. That creates uncertainty. It creates harder economic situations. Like, we got a piece of machinery that we ordered a few years ago from China, and we just had to pay like a 30% tariff on this multi-million-dollar piece of machinery that we weren't accounting for at all. That's hard. That's hard. So, I think there needs to be a balance between foreign relations and diplomacy, but also onshoring some of these critical materials and supply chains that go into, also right here in Texas, Samsung is building a $17 billion semiconductor plant. So we talk about the importance of AI and the importance of building the power that can support these types of big manufacturing facilities or data facilities. Having that type of thing in the U.S. is really important, and I think that's what this current administration is trying to do too.
We have time for one more question, and then I want famous, short last words.
Someone have a question? Raise
One
your
more?
hand.
Nobody? Okay, down the front.
Hey guys, awesome stuff so far. Thanks for putting this on. A kind of hypothetical popped into my head while you guys were chatting, and I thought you gentlemen could be good at answering it here. You hear this hypothetical of like, if everyone bought an EV tomorrow, the power grid would never be able to handle that. We'd fry the grid. The demand wouldn't be able to be met. What are your guys' thoughts on that hypothetical? And with states like California, they're putting stuff in that's like every vehicle has to be an EV by, I forget the year, but it's coming. So what are your guys' thoughts on that hypothetical?
Yeah, categorically false, but under the current assumption. So if everyone basically plugs in their EV at the same time and it's a hot summer day, yes, obviously that's going to crash the grid. One thing we didn't really talk about on this one is essentially, or we touched on, is this idea of decentralization. So we are moving very rapidly to a place where everything, like voluntarily or potentially sort of mandated, the time when when your EV charges, the time when basically your thermostat goes on, is managed. And actually what that does is it creates incredible stability toward the grid. It actually makes things cheaper. And I don't necessarily need to I'll go into the details of sort of like how demand response works and load shifting. But at 100% EV penetration with vehicle to grid, so long as we have a model where essentially that charging time is managed, it's actually incredibly stabilizing to the grid and actually makes the grid a lot more cheaper as well.
Cool.
Famous last short words?
I would just say, and you guys, if you want to save the climate, stop talking about the climate. I think that is the headline going forward. Hopefully, I made clear that basically it's an economic and a value situation now. If you want to save the climate, stop talking about the climate.
I'd say it's a gold rush time right now, right? It's gold rush for power generation, for sustainability, and being on this journey is great. Also, domestic manufacturing. I'm actually testifying to Congress on Tuesday of next week on domestic manufacturing. So that's what this administration wants, and I think we're going to shift to that.
Yeah, I'd say it's a white gold rush, actually, with lithium. No, but I think that, we're seeing an incredible transformation. Everything that supports an energy transition and a digital revolution into AI are the supply chains. When I got into this business, a lot of people don't think about the underbelly, where the material that is in your battery that powers your phone or your laptop or your EV comes from. And I think that these are really tremendous investment opportunities because it's moving up and to the right, albeit maybe at a fast pace, maybe at a slow pace, but this is a transformative time. We can call it a gold rush. We can call it what did you call it?
Yeah.
Just an explosive moment for the world and humanity.
We called it a golden. Yeah.
Golden moment.
Yeah.
Our internet moment.
I love it. You guys were great. Thank you. Let's thank these guys who are trying to change our world. Thank you.
If I make one quick plug, I'm actually doing a full-day summit on energy in Texas tomorrow. So if anyone is interested in learning a little bit more about this and getting as pumped about this, just check out my LinkedIn. It's going to be a good one.
Check out his LinkedIn.
Where is it
A lot of
and
good
what
stuff
time?
on there.
It's 12:30 to 6 p.m. at Saragunda Hall.
There's going to be another session after this, a startup showcase, and then now it's time for some networking. Thank you all for coming.